The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover Return to Dark Tower, our game of the week, discuss 200 episodes of the Game Schooler Podcast in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high five games of the week. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going?
What's going on, Doug? How are you?
I am fantastic. 200 episodes. I thought about wearing a shirt and tie and a little sport coat to celebrate, but I just stuck with the Game Schooler hoodie.
Yeah, the hoodie's good, right?
Big bow. Show up with a big bow tie, all ready to go. But
did you cut off the sleeves of your hoodie or do anything like memorable to etch this moment in time? No.
Yeah, there's a 200 carved into the back of it. So
nice. Look forward to seeing that special edition.
Stay classy. All right. Any follow-up for you, Michael?
Ooh, I do have some, but I will hold until the end of this segment, Doug. I have a special announcement that I'm excited to share with some of our listeners. Some of our listeners won't care about it at all, but others will. How about you?
I won't care.
Likely.
Likely. I wanted to highlight there's a great discussion going on Discord about behavior expectations during gameplay. And the interesting thing is it's geared around grandparents and children and different expectations of what may be expected at the table and not. And I kind of wanted to chime in briefly on the topic because I think it really doesn't matter whether it's children or adults. Expectations of the game and the intended experience is important, regardless of whether you're playing with kids or adults. And I say that in the guise of, sometimes people want to sit down and they want to play a serious game and they want to get after it. And if there's one person at the table that's just having fun and making decisions willy-nilly, that can ruin a group. The same time, if everybody else is having fun and somebody is under the impression that they're out to win it and it's going to be I'm going to be doing some analysis paralysis and really going over my options, that can really kill a mood too. And I think the important part is kind of setting those expectations of what folks are trying to get out of it before they start. Now, in the case of a grandparent and grandchildren, I think that the kind of the onus would be on the grandparent to cede to the enjoyment of the children.
Unless that grandparent's trying to teach a valuable lesson. Maybe they're tired of all these participation ribbons for their grandchild who's not even going to practice half the time. They're like, I'm going to teach them how this game of sorry really works. I'm going to send them back every time.
So certainly there are skills to be learned, whether you're a kid, and it's a big part of our podcast is talking about skills, but a lot of those skills carry over to being an adult. And I think one of the big things over 200 episodes that I think we've tried to convey is how important communication is with the people that you're playing with and setting those expectations up front so that everybody's on the same page. And it usually seems that most of the hiccups happen when people aren't on the same page. And I remember one incident of this is my own bad behavior of playing a game that I thought was not a great game. And I'm not going to mention the game, but we played it once, and afterwards I'm like, this is stupid. And the next game I kind of went into it with that attitude. People are like, I want to play it again, and I did it. And then my attitude affected. Like, I caught myself in the middle of the game, and I'm like, I might be ruining this for other people, and I don't want to be
easy
doing
to
that.
do. Easy to do.
And so that's where I think, like, reading the room, setting expectations, all easier said than done. But I think if that's the goal, is to kind of get on the same page with everybody, even if that happens to be like pulling somebody aside and saying, hey, we're going to, be kind of focused on this. We really are into this game, and we want to go really competitive.
Sure.
And kind of setting those, or, whatever, what I'm trying to say. The expectations and communication is important. So I encourage folks to check that out on the Discord, because it's a very interesting topic and some good feedback and conversation about that situation. And every week something comes up, and there's a different discussion that's going on there that I just love to see, and people are chiming in with opinions, advice, and it's always coming from a good place, which is awesome. That makes it feel like a productive conversation, as opposed to spewing hate and blathering and things like that. So just wanted to highlight that.
I'll chime in on the Discord as well. If you go over to the solo games thread,
Is this the announcement?
You'll just have to listen patiently, Doug. I posed a question a few days back, which will be about a week back by the time this episode drops, regarding the game A Gentle Rain. Just wondering if anyone is indeed interested in that game. And here's kind of, and I had teased this in the Discord. Folks over at Incredible Dream Studio have put out a celebratory gift campaign, which I think is just absolutely outstanding and awesome. Basically, for reviewers and board game media channels, you can gift away a copy of A Gentle Rain, and what Incredible Dreams ask is that you share it out. So whether you share it out on X or in the Discord, or just send us an email of, hey, here it is, and this is why the game's awesome. Why I said Doug wouldn't be interested in it. It is a solo-only game. However, it's a solo-only game that's available in Target and other stores in North America. This contest, I think, is only going to be for North America. So here's what I'm going to say. Contest, gift giveaway, I don't know the right terms. But if you give a thumbs up by December 20th, you will be eligible for a drawing. So go into the Discord, give a thumbs up in the solo games to a question that I had recently asked of if you are interested in, or if you like A Gentle Rain. And if you are listening to this on the day of like December 20th and you're not in the Discord, you can always send us an email to email@gameschooler.com. That one's still active, right, Doug? Comes to both of us.
But you should just sign up for the Discord.
You should. But some folks, might be, and I'll get to that more in our School of Gaming segment. We might have some email friends out there who are more comfortable in that environment. You can enter email@gameschooler.com, cut off at a random time on December 20th, because I hope to get it in the mail that day. I did hear back from somebody already that it is not available in the UK. So I'm tentatively thinking of adding our UK friends into the raffle, but I do reserve the right to withdraw that gift.
I think you should just make it hard.
If the shipping is over $40. No, I'm going to set a shipping limit of $40. If I got to go into my wallet for more than $40 for this gift to ship this box that is smaller than what our business cards come in, Doug. Like our business cards that come in this box, the Gentle Rain box is going to be much smaller than that. So I'm just... it's mine. I get to choose how I want to do it.
I know, but from a contest standpoint, you don't want to say, "Well, win. You're a winner," and then put in their shipping address and say, "It's too much. You're not a winner."
Come on, I don't.
So let's just keep either say one or the other to keep it fair.
Well, that's really you'll have to stay tuned to the Discord, because I'll put the rules for this gift. All right, that Doug has turned into a contest raffle. I think I may have used those words as well. Yeah. But anyway, I wanted to that's kind of a cool idea from Incredible Dreams. It's, hey, there's a gift I don't even know what they called it. I should know that coming into this segment. But anyway, we have one copy that we'll be giving away to one of our listeners, and that's kind of cool.
All right, that is awesome, and I'm always about loving giving out free games. So that is cool. Speaking of
that shipping across the seas to the UK, friends, that can be painful. I did do that once for a gift and a raffle, so that's where Doug is being very clear about maybe you shouldn't do that again.
Well, I don't care what you want to do with your own money, Michael. That's up to you.
I appreciate that.
But
Doug.
I also feel like there should be clear rules, and I think folks that are living in other countries will understand that sometimes they are unfortunately excluded from those because of shipping issues.
Don't you feel bad for them?
The same way that I feel bad about not being able to get Darkside Rising and other games that are published in other countries. Like I couldn't get Comic Hunters for a very long time.
I believe you have it in your collection currently. Is
I
that
do
accurate?
now.
Okay,
I'm also disappointed that every Kickstarter backer in Asia gets it before I do. So, I mean, there are pros and cons of the hobby.
Different segment.
Your geolocation.
So that's what's awesome with gaming is that we have a gift to give away from a publisher, and I thought that was cool. And then just one other thing to follow up on. I had a really cool day at work that I didn't see coming. I got to play games at a year-end holiday celebration. We had lunch as a work group, and then it was, hey, you wanna play some games? So we played Scribbly Gum and Flip 7, and Green Team wins, and it was fantastic. It was a really, really good time. So I want to just thank folks for putting some of those events out in the Discord as well. And it's one thing to have a board game podcast, but I do keep like kind of boundaries, and at work, I believe it or not, I try to be professional. So that was good though. It was a good fun day, and I do encourage anyone who loves the hobby. It's a fine line because you don't want to freak people out, and they're like, you have a room full of games, like full of games, and then you get into that. Oh, what a weirdo! But you want to also share the hobby, and
well, I always think it's interesting when you have events like that and you get to see and interact with people that you work with, and in cases every day, and you get to see them in a different light, and different parts of their personality come out when they're playing games, even if it's just something simple. And I just remember a lot of times with coworkers I've had in the past, and it's like you have your work relationship, and it's like you're kind of like work friends, but that doesn't necessarily translate to out of friends and out of work friends. And if you move to a different job, you're not going to necessarily continue being friends with those folks. It's just a part of life. But sometimes when you can do those game things, it's the same thing of like if you go to a barbecue, it's like you have an after hours barbecue, and suddenly you're seeing people in a different light, and they're more of their personality comes out. And I think gaming is such a good social lubricant for providing that and getting a little bit of a closer bond with some of those folks, and is really cool.
Yeah. And yeah, well said.
As far as what's awesome in gaming for me, I just wanted to say, we've never done this before, but I'm going to say that the Game Schooler podcast is pretty awesome.
Whoa.
And if
humble much?
Hey,
my mic's not muted. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, Doug. What were you saying?
If ever there was a time to do it at the 200th episode, you don't think that's a good time, Michael?
I think it's a great time.
Yeah.
The show is awesome. We're awesome. Go ahead. You're awesome, Doug.
I said the show is awesome. I didn't say we were awesome. And the folks that listen to it are awesome. But, if
they're everything. They're the people that make it.
If you are enjoying what we do here and we're having a good time doing it, spread it around. Let people know about it. Just because we want to continue to spread positivity and a safe space to game with families and for people to enjoy the games that they like with no snark and pushback. And if that's something that you think needs to be out there more, we'd love for you to share what we're doing.
Yeah, and it also helps our egos, and I don't mean this in a truly, no, I mean we have families, we have children, we have wives, and if just to be able to say that, okay, 200 episodes, but we know we have more than 12 listeners. You know what I mean? Like and I'll talk more about that in the School of Gaming too, where the first 1 to 50 episodes, we really had no idea how many listeners. We just based it on some random emails that we got from time to time, and so the every time that somebody jumps in that Discord and then you see 4 or 5 people welcome them, it's a boost. Yeah, as folks that love telling the story of games and love putting together lists and also having a topical segment each week. It really is nice when somebody stumbles into the show and they just let you know that they enjoy it. And that's really what this is about.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly does help a lot, and makes you feel like you're doing something. And a lot of times it's in a medium like this where you're not always getting immediate feedback, and I like talking to my buddy every week, so that works out great. But
same,
getting that feedback is cool, and the podcast is awesome, and I'm proud of it. We're proud of it, and we want you to share it with as many people as possible. Anything awesome for you else that you want to highlight?
Yeah, just continuing to play games with my family. I think it's also time to just mention that 200 episodes in and had enough. We played Dinosaur Tea Party again this weekend because we had 10 minutes and my wife and my 9-year-old wanted to play a game. Everyone knows the rules of it. It was a game of the week and one that's now a staple in our house. There's something really rewarding and enjoyable about that, because a family as a nuclear unit is always changing, right? My kids are always aging up and going into different stages, and just getting to enjoy the journey in that part of the process. And board games have a place in our household, and it might not be that way for every home, but I think for a lot of our listeners, it's that way. And that's just one other thing that I'm glad that it's not just about churning through games and getting ready for the next show, that those staples still come out. And, are you in a green room? And then people are in characters.
Michael said, I have no idea.
Perchance I may be in a green room because the purple and the orange both say no. So it's that continues to be fun. Those enjoyable moments that can't be planned for, that don't know that they're coming around, and they just happen, whether it's with friends or family. So
you don't know when they're coming around, and you don't know when they're going away. So enjoy them while they're here. We wanted to pick out some special games for the 200th episode, and one of those falls in our Spotlight segment. This week we're going to be talking about The Gang, which was published in 2024 by Kosmos. This is a game that you've heard us talk about, maybe on some high five lists, and definitely after our Gen Con episode. The designers are John Cooper and Corey Heath, and the artist is Fiore. 3 to 6 players and about 20 minutes. The Gang is a cooperative version of Texas Hold'em. Players bet on how good they think their hand of cards will be relative to the other players, then try to make their predictions a reality. Early in the round, without talking to each other, players choose a chip indicating how good they think their hand is. Then they begin dealing cards into the middle of the table and have a chance to reassess their hands as more cards are revealed. At the end of the round, players will make a final selection of where they think their hand ranks, and players will see whether they correctly evaluated their hand. If all the players did, you get to open one of the bank vaults. If not, you trip the alarm. If you manage to open 3 vaults before you trip the alarm 3 times, your gang wins. Very simple concept, but a phenomenal game, and one that we really wanted to highlight. I think we both have enjoyed this game immensely.
I love this game. Yeah.
And for me, I can say that this game has replaced so many other games for me. For example, a game like The Crew is no longer in my collection because this replaces it. This replaces games like Hanabi or some of those other hidden information guessing games. This one just works for me. And I know it might not work for folks that are not familiar with, Texas Hold'em poker or 5-card stud or any of the other type of poker variants that are out there. That may be a learning curve for you. But if you are familiar with the game, I find it really hard to believe that you would not fall in love with this game.
Yeah, and the other thing that's just incredible about it is, so there's two other things that I think, since we're mentioning it, we just need to highlight. One is the ability cards, the cards that will modify the game. And I will turn it over to let you talk about that. Two, and I don't want to do FOMO, folks. That's not my intent of what I'm about to say. But at Gen Con, when we got promo pack. And so I'm not sure that this is in every copy, but I do think it's somewhat available. And that promo pack actually modifies the gang, where it brings in multiple types of poker, like Omaha and others, which I think is just really, really fascinating.
Yeah, and jokers, different things like that can be added to the game. Michael was referring to the variants or the powers, and it's a really cool concept, which is, depending on the player count that you have, if you are playing with fewer players, the game is generally just going to be easier. It's easier to get 3 hands in order than it is to get 6 hands in the correct order, especially when some of those hands could be off by a single card difference of one being more powerful than the other. One may have a jack and one may have a queen, and the hand with the queen is going to be slightly higher. So it gets more difficult. The modifier cards, there's 2 different decks of them, ones that make the game easier and ones that make the game harder. And you can modify the difficulty as you play. So if on a round you open a bank vault, the next round you can make a little bit more difficult. Or if you fail and you trip an alarm, the next round you can use one of these cards and make the game a little bit easier. Maybe one person can show part of their hand at the opening. Maybe somebody can draw an extra card to modify their hand, things like that. And it's a really cool concept that really mixes up and adds a variety to the game in a way that doesn't bog down the game with rules or make some convoluted variant that is like, oh, well, if you want to make it harder, you do this and remove these 5 cards and do this. You just flip over a card on the top of the deck and you're ready to go. And, the one I played not too long ago, we were at my niece's birthday party and we played with 6 players, and it was difficult. And it was like, we're just making the rule that we're playing with a helping modifier every round.
Oh,
and
that's interesting.
And it was cool to see what came out of like, oh, that's interesting. And, okay, how are we going to make this work? And how do you maximize it? And when do you, some of them, it's like they happen instantly. Some of them you have to determine at what point during the round you want to use it. So it adds a lot of variety into the game, just in the base box. It's like, if it's really easy for you, just keep adding those difficulty ones on there. I don't know if it says it in the rule, but it's like there's no reason you couldn't put 2 of them on there if you were dominating the game. So I like that variable scale works really cool.
Yeah, and we were fortunate enough, like I said, to be able to pick it up at Gen Con. Got to meet both the designers, John Cooper and Corey Heath. Corey recently passed away. And just to say that the gang is readily available for under $15, published from Kosmos. So it's a very affordable game that works well in a lot of different settings, households, on the road, as Doug has talked about, taking it on the road to family events. I think it could work in schools if you're a school where you play card games, because, and certainly a library setting as well, because really easy to check in and check out. The box has very nice tokens. The cards are pretty easy to just throw in a baggie, and the game tidies up very, very nicely.
Yeah, the artwork is cool, and I made a note that there's an elegance in the production of this game, and the simplicity of this game is why I think it works out really well. So that is our spotlight this week, The Gang from Kosmos. Before we move on to the game of the week, I want to talk about the Discord. We mentioned it briefly at the top of the show, but you can sign up by going to gameschooler.com/Discord, a great community there. We'd recommend you checking it out. And even if you're a lurker, sign up and go there and just hang out. And you don't have to participate to get a lot of value of by just listening and reading what the other folks are posting, because there's a lot of valuable content in there. Spread the word about the podcast. And if you have any questions or comments, reach out to us directly. Email at gameschooler.com. Now let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is Return to Dark Tower. Doug, give us the stats.
All right, published in 2022 by Restoration Games. The designer list is as follows: Tim Burrell-Soward, Isaac Childress, Noah Cohen, Rob Davio, Justin D. Jacobsons, and Brian Neff. I feel like I'm reading the Academy Awards of producer credits there. And there are an equally amount of artists that are involved in this game. 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 120 minutes. It is for ages 10 plus on the side of the box. That's pushing it. You probably want to be in the 11 to 12-year-olds. But yeah. Certainly playable at 10. It is a 2.66 weight on Board Game Geek, but I think, which normally would kind of put it in the light hobby category, but I'm going to say based on playtime and the involvement, I'm going to go full-blown hobby on this one. You agree with
hobby. That? Yeah, absolutely. It's a hobby game, and I've played this game with my teenager, and I can comfortably say it's a hobby game.
Yep. So this was the 2022 Golden Geek Best Cooperative Game winner, the 2022 Dice Tower Best Solo Game winner, and the 2022 Dice Tower Best Co-op Game of the Year.
Got some awards.
It is a sequel to the 1981 Grail game, Return to Dark Tower. Is a game for 1 to 4 players who take the role of heroes. Together they gather resources, cleanse buildings, defeat monsters, and undertake quests to build up the strength and discern what foe ultimately awaits them. When the heroes face the tower, the game shifts into its dramatic second act, where the players have one chance to defeat the enemy once.
No sound effects for you on that one, Doug? No sound effects on the tower? You got to get your hands out of there. It's about to rotate.
Okay. Keep your hands clear. It's about to rotate. So on your turn, you're going to get a special ability action called a banner action at the start of every turn. And then you have one main action, which is going to be either 2 quests. There are several quests that are going to be out on the board. You can battle, or you can cleanse. Cleansing is clearing skulls off of, there are 4 buildings in each of the 4 quadrants of the board: east, west, north, and south.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, it took me a bit there. The skulls are going to fall out of the giant tower that's in the middle of the board and fall into some of these buildings, which then you can remove those skulls by cleansing them. You can battle the monsters on the board as well. You're also able to move every round. That move can be interrupted to do your actions. And if you are at a building, you can do a reinforce action, which is giving you more warriors or more spirit. It's giving you gear. It's giving you virtue, which are more special abilities that you can. You can get treasure and do all that stuff to kind of improve your hero as you go along. Eventually, at the end of every turn, I shouldn't say eventually, but at the end of every turn, you will drop a skull into the tower, which may shoot out one of the openings, or it may just stay in there for a later time to fall out when a door is removed from the tower, or the tower spins and it spits skulls out that have been lodged in there. And the game runs over a there's not a set number of turns. There are a certain number of turns that will make up a month, and then, but you don't know how many turns that is. It could be 7, it could be 8. It depends on the player count. Eventually, the month will end. New quests will come out. You'll get bonuses for completing quests. Bad stuff will happen if you don't complete some quests. The monsters will get angrier if you're not battling them. So it's kind of a big pressure cooker that's going on. And then you keep playing until you ultimately reveal the big baddie, and then you have a chance to fight them. The big component that I have not mentioned is that this game is a very app-driven game. In fact, you need the app to control the tower, but it also does a great job of managing what otherwise would be accomplished by a whole bunch of shuffled cards and decks and things. So the app really cleans up the battles and going into dungeons and things like that. So that's just a kind of a general overview. I don't know that we need to go into too much more detail on that because you could really get lost in the weeds. However, I will say that the rule book is extremely well laid out.
Yeah, and I think I was picking up on the context clues. I think I was picking up what you were dropping down there. I won't get too lost in the weeds and on too many wandering paths here, but I do want to reinforce a few things that you just said. The app is incredible. From the time you enter this game, because dear listeners, I was very intimidated by this game. This was a game that when it first came out was what I considered to be a Kickstarter that was out of my price range. It was a game that at the time when I was just getting into, but I'd been about a year and a half into backing Kickstarters, and this one came up, and I was like, oh, I'm really interested, but that price point scares me a bit. And over time, the game's become more available through a lot of different means. But that tower that sits in the middle of the table that runs off of the app is exquisite. It is incredible. And the app also has nice little thematic music that builds throughout. I don't know if I ever told you this story, Doug, but the first time I was playing the game, I had my AirPods in, connected to the family iPad at the table, and I was going through, and all of a sudden one of my kiddos came up and tapped my shoulder, and I went, ah! I got so scared because I was immersed and engaged in a different world, trying to navigate my way through, and I can remember the character. I can remember exactly what I was doing in the game when that happened. There's a level of engagement with Return to Dark Tower that works at 1 players all the way through 4 players. And so for folks who may have looked at this game in the past and thought it's too this, it's too that, I just wanted to share my experience with some of that as well. It wasn't until I saw it on the table at a convention after one of our friends had said, you should really take a look at this game. I think you're going to like it. And I sat down and played it. And 3 hours later, I was on the hunt for my own copy of Return to Dark Tower. And I've been talking about it with most folks I play games with since then.
Yeah, I also have an interesting Michael audio story with Return to Dark Tower because I believe it was the first time I was playing this game at your house, and we were using said iPad, and I think the audio kept connecting to your wife's iPod or AirPods. And she's like, Michael, you need to change the Bluetooth or something, because it was like every 5 minutes we're like, what happened to the audio? And there's, why do I keep getting Return to Dark Tower? I'm trying to listen to an audiobook, which was great. But you hit on a great point. So the base MSRP for this game is $190, and it's one of those. A lot. When it came out with the Kickstarter,
that's still a lot. Like even still, today, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, when you come out with the Kickstarter, there are some times that, anymore, and I'll read it, and I was interested in this one too, but not without trying it. Yeah. I wasn't going to spend $190 on something that I didn't know if I would like or not. And I had a lot of the same assumptions that you did. The same friend is like, I think you like cooperative games. I think you would really like this one.
And I love adventure games. And
I was, it's like generic fantasy. It's too complicated. It's a board game geek darling. Everybody seems to love it. There's all these things that were kind of, it's so expensive that I was like, was just easier not to want it or like it,
Yeah.
And it was one that I'm glad I got a chance to play, and it's one I'm glad I got a chance to play first, because then in hindsight I'm like, this is, for me, worth it.
Yeah.
I have my own version now, and the amount of variety in this game, I counted them up, there's 10 scenarios in the app, there are 8 main adversaries, and 4 different heroes. So in preparing for this episode, Michael and I were going to play a game of it, and we were thought about throwing some expansions in. I was like, Michael, there is so much stuff in the base game. We don't even know.
That's really kind of you, Doug. I was pushing hard to play the Covenant expansion with Doug,
which I do want to play.
Yeah,
but it's
we
like
will.
There's so much stuff in there. It's like, let's play a different
villain with different characters. Than we've done before.
Different scenario. But that being said, it's like, this is a hobby game, and I may be crazy for this, but this was a game that, because of the way the player board lays out a person's turn on what you can do, it's a complete flow chart of here's what you can do, and even to the point of, like, at the end of your turn, put a skull in the thing. It's like you can just go down the list, and the app does such a good job of integrating everything, is that this was a game that I pretty much used as an introduction game, because the hand holding while you're playing is so easy for a new player to kind of get the grasp of it right away, and being so immersed and seeing the table, the table presence. I'm like, this is a great game to just try and show somebody, like, this is what board games are doing now.
Yeah. So if you played Catan, if you played Ticket to Ride, and then you've been out of the hobby for a decade, if you have 2 hours, why don't you sit down at the table? I've got some extra batteries here, so I know that we're going to get all the way through the tower. And you're spot on. You're exactly right. We've talked about this, and Flamecraft is really the first time where we brought this up, where a game has been developed to the point where it is incredibly intuitive about what you need to do on your turn, and not only that, but what other players need to do. So really the only slight variance from Doug's character to the character that I'm playing with, they'll have an ability. So maybe I can move 4, a base movement of 4 instead of 3, right? And then at the very start of your turn, you have what's called a banner action. And so other than those 2 pieces, the characters play the same. And what I love about that in this cooperative is your turn always ends by dropping a skull in the tower. So about, I'd say, the 3rd or 4th game, anytime you get about halfway through that second month, the first month is only 2 turns. Anytime you get about halfway through that second month, at least I can, and playing with you, really get so engaged. It's like, okay, what I do, I kind of get lost in my own order of operations. But that drop a skull in the tower really is a bookend to my turn. Yes, my turn is complete. I can't take something back. I can't, well, what if I do this? What if I do that? Because it triggers the next events and the actions in the app. And it's just a nice little reminder, too, and you have that built-in time on your turn to possibly undo or to possibly revisit some decisions or to think about. But once that skull's dropped in the tower, we're moving on, and it's the next person's turn. Yeah. I like that flow process.
Yeah. One of the coolest things that the app does is, as the game goes along and you collect new gear and treasure and stuff, you gain what they call advantages. And when you are battling a foe or going against the main villain, they have like a deck of 10 cards, I believe. 8 to 10 cards, depending on the villain. And you're going to randomly pick a couple of them out that you're going to battle. If it's a weak one, you're only going to pick 1 card. But if it's a level 4, you're picking 4 cards. And the big bad guy, you got to make it through 5 cards and survive them, and they are brutal. But you gain these advantages, and you spend the advantage to basically weaken a card. The app then remembers that card is weakened for the other players. So that level of bookkeeping of, okay, I spent an advantage, and so maybe it was a card that initially started as lose 10 warriors, and I played an advantage to it. Now it's only lose 5 warriors. that's going to stay as a lose 5 warrior cards for the rest of the game. So if Michael happens to draw that card, that's what it's going to be. Which, if you think about doing that as an analog system, not digitally, that would have to be, okay, this is card 7. I want to use an advantage on it. Get card 7B and add that to the deck and take out 7A. Oh, you want to use another advantage? Take it 7B out and now add 7D or C to the deck. And you'd have to have a whole thing of cards that you're shuffling.
Certain about that. That's how that works. That you weaken the card.
How would you do that?
Well, I don't know. I know that you think that's how it works. I just haven't confirmed it, and I looked it up before the show.
What do you mean how it works?
Are you sure that you weaken the card with those advantages? Okay.
Certainly for the main bad guy.
Okay.
For sure. Now, whether it happens, but even if it is just the main bad guy, there's 8 bad guys that have 10 cards each.
Yeah.
That I'm assuming are somewhat different on what they do. I don't know. I haven't played every one, but the bookkeeping of that would be crazy.
The app does so much of the heavy lifting, and it does a nice job too of. And these are nitpicky, nuanced things, right? But hey, it's what gamers do. I think even in the setup of, okay, if you and I both know how to play Return to Dark Tower, well, what type of villain do we want to play tonight? What type of character do you want to play? And you just get to kind of flip through the app in a way that's not as intimidating as, say, a Mansions of Madness, right? Yeah. Where I'm looking through your box and all your painted mittings and be like, whatever you want to do. You want to take on that ship or do the other thing? And I think the Return to Dark Tower, it goes back. That app, it just makes it that much more accessible.
Yeah.
To borrow a jargon word from the hobby. I do want to come back to one thing that you said earlier, because it's absolutely true that having this game on the table draws other people to want to play this game.
Yeah.
And that is how I was brought into this game. And that is how I brought in one of my teenage kiddos into the game. I was playing solo at a time when we weren't playing a ton of games together, and then all of a sudden, I want to try that game. Yeah, come on, sit down. We'll make time this weekend and play. There is something about it on the table that really does bring people to it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any scandalous artwork in there. There may be a little bit of the I don't know what's the right word. It's not gore, but it's darker
violence.
Darker violent fantasy type of artwork. So be aware of that. I'm going to do something completely different that I've never done before, and this is every episode we talk about with our game of the week, the skills that folks can learn and that are present in this game. And this game has so many that I'm just going to read the list of all of the skills that I think are in this game. And if you're a longtime listener, if you've been listening for 200 episodes or 100, you've probably heard the definition for most of these, so I'm not going to go over them in great detail. But logistics, figuring out where things are going and how to get and accomplish what you need to do. There's group discussion and persuasion in between every turn, trying to figure out, okay, you go here, I'll go there, you do that. Well, maybe you should do this. That's happening. There's risk management because you don't know when the month is going to end and when those enemies are going to become more violent and dangerous. There's spatial perception. Oh, the quest is on that side of the board. How am I going to get there? Oh, there's another quest here. These monsters are there. You have to be aware of those. There's tactical and strategic thinking. You know what monsters are in the game and what kind of weaknesses they have, but you may not be able to use them right now. You need to build up long-term and be able to pivot while you go. There are going to be times when the bad guys are going to do bad stuff to you, so you need resilience. You need patience because sometimes you have turns that are setup turns, and sometimes you have really awesome turns, but even the setup turns seem cool. There's reading, there's communication, there's resource management. You're managing warriors and your spirit. There's time management. You don't know when the month is ending. You don't know when those creatures are going to become stronger. There's personal responsibility. There are times in this game where you will make a decision, do something, whether that's to go further into a dungeon and kind of push your luck and find out I should not have pushed my luck.
Yeah.
There's cooperation. There's selflessness of trading items away so somebody else can have an awesome turn because that's what you need to do to beat the tower. You have to concentrate the entire time. You have to observe what's going on. You're processing information. You're making decisions. And not only is there the overarching goal of defeating the tower, there are many quests and goals for every month of the game that are constantly coming up and changing and adding new things that you can do to this game. So that's a laundry list, which is, this is episode 200. This is a phenomenal game, and it's doing all of those things, which is hard to believe.
Yeah, you left out a few skills, Doug.
Oh, yeah? What did I leave out?
No,
tell me what I left out.
No, I just had two other additional skills in kind of taking that great compilation in a slightly different, maybe condensed direction. Group discussion happens from the start of the game all the way to about 2 days after it's been boxed up.
Yeah.
From even if I were to walk into your house tomorrow, and if this game were set up on the table and you assigned a character to me and a quest was already assigned in the app and it's ready to go, there is a level of discussion that begins. So because of that, the direct personal agency that is in this cooperative game elevates this game right to the top of a lot of my list. Yeah. We could both like different games, but I think in the world of who likes what type of game, you definitely tend to lean more towards cooperatives than I do. And at the same time, this is going to be a top 5 game for me on most lists that I would ever put together because I love the sense of going on an adventure with a group of people. So it's that sense of we're talking about what we're doing from the time this thing gets on the table. Even with, I feel like the bookkeeping is really well spread out too. As monsters and quests are coming out, this isn't a game where one person is typically going to just GM the whole thing. I really feel like that sense of adventure carries on throughout different threads in the game. And some of that just has to do with how big the map is and the table presence of it, right? If I'm sitting in the south, and you're sitting in the north, whatever things come out in the south and the east, I'm going to get them out on the map, and you're going to have the north and the west. And all those little different pieces of this game tend to fit together in a way that really works for me. And I continue to be surprised by it.
Yeah, it works great for both of us, but there's certainly a marriage of theme, adventure, storytelling with streamlined mechanics that make the game easier. And it's a game that I would describe as an experience, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of games that are an experience. There are games that are fun. There are games that you participate in and do. But this is an experience. It is fun, and you will remember that experience, which makes it special. I mean, I think as far as a best fit, this is if you have a hobby game night, it's ideal. And I think it's a great convention game. With that price tag, it's an awesome game to try out. And
throw $8 down and spend 4 hours playing it.
And this is one of those that's like, you're driving to the con or somebody's driving or it's the night before. The rule book's not that long. You can pull up the rule book, go to a convention, check this game out, and be ready to play without feeling like, sometimes you unbox a game and you have to have all the components in your hand and kind of look at them and be like, what is this? What is this? This rule book is so good that you can read it and you're like, I'm ready to go.
That's a really good point. I wasn't thinking about that when I was thinking about signing up, paying $6 to $8 and playing it.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Not just going and checking it out from a library and all the things that come with that. That is a really good point because of the rule book and how easy it is to learn a character and get into. Just download the app ahead of time. You'll be ready to go.
Yeah. So anything else on this one, Michael?
Just a sense of gratitude for the team that made it.
Yeah.
And obviously we've both gone into our wallets to get it. So we're not saying this to try to get some added love from the folks at Restoration Games, but the fact that this is a game that came out in 1981 and was a Grail game, and then a team of just phenomenal designers and thinkers in the hobby come together, and what we didn't talk about is the tower is a technological marvel, folks. I mean, this is a Bluetooth tower that connects easily to devices, and how it spits out the skulls, and when the doors open, and if something is flashing in the zone where you're sitting, then you might have to pay extra or lose something extra. We didn't really get into the whole spirit economy, so there's a lot of other else. But I just think a sense of gratitude that games like this are continuing to be made, and also a sense of humility for me to just not overlook something. Whether it comes out on Kickstarter or I do a walk by at a convention or hear the pitch. It's this is a memorable game for a lot of reasons. It's been a great teaching tool to me as a gamer, and one that I'm very appreciative to be able to get to play.
Yeah, there's no publisher pleading on this one, because both Michael and I are completely blinged out. There is literally nothing they could give us because we have purchased it all.
Now you're going to get us in trouble, yeah.
So,
you don't have the Dark Court expansion. You could get those minis yet.
I don't need the minis. I'm completely content with.
I'll let you borrow mine if you ever want.
I actually am completely content not having the minis. I think it adds another level of fiddly putting stuff out. So
I like that. I like dropping the big old Titan
to stare at my troll.
That Titan thing comes out on the board, man. You got to clear them out of there. Get those frost trolls out.
But a phenomenal game, and our game of the week, Return to Dark Tower from Restoration Games.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we discuss the first 200 episodes of the Game Schooler podcast, a reflection.
Wow. 200 episodes. Can you believe that, Michael? That is a lot of time. I am immensely proud that we made it to this point. As I was kind of making notes for this segment, I had questions that I kind of wanted to ask you that I was asking myself to make notes on. And so I don't, how did you prep for this?
I distilled episodes 1 through 50, 50 through 100, 100 to 150, and 150 to 200 down to a single word.
So crap, garbage for 1 to 50, right?
1 to 50 was lonely.
Learning.
Lonely.
Yeah, no, but also learning.
Yeah, and 50 to 100 was consuming, and 100 to 150 was authentic, and 150 to 200 was community. And so I feel like in the first 50 episodes, it was really just you and me trying to figure this out and see where it would go, and not by lonely. It really just was the two of us. And whenever we would feel like, boy, are we making a positive difference? Are we making a dent? Are people listening? And get to a moment of frustration, an email would come in.
Yeah.
And it would just give us that spark. And then, 50 to 100 and this is me personally. I'm not going to speak for you, but I know in episode 50.
I think you're spot on. I think you've done a very good job of distilling that into a word that I will partner with everything you're saying.
For me, then episodes 50 to 100, consuming, I was trying to keep up with the entire hobby, and then take on well, what are we? Are we board game journalism? Are we trying to be, scholars? Or are we creators? What really is our role? And while, figuring some of that out, trying to play every single game and fill in a backlog of 25 years of games. And that, for me, that was a year where I doubt I ever spend that much on board games again, because just trying to, really go and at the end of it, feel like feeling consumed and just getting a sense of that consumerism and having games that we would discuss, but then they stay on my shelf and shrink, and wondering if, I'm ever going to play it. And so it was just kind of for me, it was a sense of the show was kind of consuming in a way that hobbies and passions can be from time to time. Right.
Well, I think it was similar on that line, but different, is the exact same word of consuming, but it was for us, and we took a break right after or right before 100 for a couple weeks, just a quick break to just recharge, because we were falling into that trap that we eventually decided after 100 that we weren't going to do anymore, which was trying to keep up with every board game reviewer. And that we couldn't review, we didn't have the time, and we were just reviewing and playing so much stuff to try and have stuff to talk about and make sure that we were covering everything, and we were getting burnt out for the point that we didn't have. So it's like there was the consuming of games and the consuming of us because we were consuming games, that we were fried, that it was just a point of like, in order for this to continue, we needed to change our focus and what we were thinking about to what the show is now, or is manifested itself into, about how we cover games and why we're covering games and how we want to approach them, and all of those things that changed at that time.
Well, and I think somewhere between episodes, like 87 to 100, just for me personally, I think I lost that sense of play and wonder and awe and the magic circle and the why, because instead it almost became sort of a job and not a hobby. And also somewhere along there in the first 100 episodes, just trying to figure out how the world of podcasting works, and do you get a sponsor? Do you do this? And do you do that? And I feel like when we came back in episode 100 and it went from, we switched up just how we introed games about here's a game you should add to your collection, to a game you should try if you get the chance. To me, there was just something very authentic about our show after episode 100. We were able to disagree, even if it was just slightly, about a game in the Game of the Week episode or segment, or share a little bit more about why some games worked for us and others didn't, and there was less of a sense to have to cover all of the games from all of the publishers, and more of a sense and duty to tell the story of a game. Can we take one game every week and tell the story of that game and talk about why it's engaging, what some of the skills are, why we like it, why we think you should try it if you get the chance? And you're right. I think since then, the show's just been fun, been a lot of fun. Again, no matter how busy life gets, no matter what joys, triumphs, and tragedies happen in life, the show's just been something that I look forward to doing with you. And it really did start there in right around episode 100 for me.
Yeah. So, and what about your, do you have anything from the 150 to 200?
Yeah, community.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
And that's the D word. That's Discord, and you talk about it on every episode, and it's real. Just that has been a connection to a group of people, where you often say like-minded individuals, or I should say, and just people who seem to really lock in on what is awesome in gaming and what brings people joy in the hobby, it's there. It's in the Discord, and people from all walks of life who are at every stage along their journey in the hobby. I feel like there is a Game Schooler podcast community that I don't think I know I certainly didn't feel in episodes 1 to 50. And it may not have been there. Some of those things, it takes time to build community. Culture takes time, and I do feel that, and I also feel that in some of the interviews. We've reached out to people and brought them on the show, and sometimes it's outside of our realm a little bit, but they're definitely adding something that you and I can't add. So that's where I'm at on that.
Yeah, I think there's whether it was at episode 100 spot or not, I think, when you start a podcast, and certainly what the podcast started for and the reasons for starting the podcast, and you have the ideas of like, oh, well, we could make some money for this, or if we could do that. And I think about episode 100, we kind of made the decision that it's like, kind of really didn't care whether we ever made money from this, and it was never about the money. And
it'd be about the joy.
The bare minimum was, okay, if there are some people that enjoy listening to us, and as buddies we get to talk once a week about games that we love playing together, and the experiences of those, that makes it worth it. And when that change happened, it became less about, okay, well, how do we sell things? How do we, can we get a sponsorship? Can we get an extra money? Because it's like, we're both in positions that, this is not going to replace their job.
No.
You get people that are, in the hobby, the game, or, in the podcast world and in the board game media, seems to be like, okay, I just need to build this up enough, and then maybe I can quit my job and I can do this full time. And it's like, that would be cool, but it's not feasible for either one of us. And the second that we were just like, then let's just take it off the table and enjoy what we're doing. And that's when things really became super authentic, because it was there's no extra pretense behind it. There's no hidden agenda of like, well, we're going to talk to you about this way, but our secret goal is to get this. We buy 80% of the games that we talk about. Yes, we have had some awesome experiences and unexpected results from doing the podcast.
Oh, man.
We've
Incredible.
been able to go
gifts.
to Gen Con twice as members of the press. We've interviewed awesome people, Dr. Rainer Knizia and Phil Walker Harding and Mike DeLisio, just to name a few. A lot of great designers, Danielle Reynolds and other folks.
Mark from Grand Gamers Guild, while we're name dropping.
Yep. And then Michael talked about the community that, has been a big part of that, of unexpected consequences and things that happened. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I do think there's something to, with also, I don't know. I don't know how to say this without sounding like a dork or coming off just really odd, but talking to a local publisher one time and telling him, like, I like your game so much that I'm spending my gaming allowance on them. And I don't think that
which part about that is a gaming allowance?
Well,
What's the dork part?
I don't think that thought ever came through to the publisher. The instant response back was, well, why don't you just buy all of them? And I had to look at him and be like, because I don't have that kind of money. Like, what do you mean? Why don't I just buy all of your games? What? You're one publisher. I'm not buying all of your games just to buy your games and have a complete set of
by the
your
way.
games. Oh yeah, it was. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for getting me in trouble with the
all
big
700 Asmodee titles.
But I do think because some of those relationships and just some of those connections, and even with other content creators and other podcast folks, there's a sense of, we're right here learning with you. And I'm not saying that we are in the industry or in the hobby like that, but just being able to give that sense of perspective once in a while to other folks of just, we're pretty ordinary gamers like anybody else.
Yeah.
we just happened to record a weekly podcast, and so had that happen more than once, where somebody in the industry or will make a comment like, no, that's not how normal folks are. Your expectations are unrealistic.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you talk about that, because I made a list of 3 things that I've learned about the hobby over 200 episodes. The first thing is that there are a lot of good games, and that truly great games are hard to come by. But I say that knowing that is completely subjective. But for me, I've played a lot of really good games over 200 episodes, and a handful of great ones. And the more games you play, the more you realize that there aren't as many great ones as when you first get into the hobby. When you first get into the hobby, you have that new gamer enthusiasm, and you think, every game is amazing, and there are so many classics I need to go and revisit. But once you play more and more games, and when I say good games, I'm not disparaging those as they're just good. I'm like, they're really good games.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing that I've learned is that there are seasons in gaming, and sometimes those are determined by your life, and sometimes they're determined by the hobby. Through the course of these 200 episodes, things change. Kids, just on basic math, that's almost 4 years of episodes. That's a 9-year-old when we started is now 13.
Yeah.
And the games that they were playing when we started are no longer the games that they're playing now. And the games I'm playing with my 6-year-old are different than I played with the other daughter when she was 6, because there are new games and different games, and maybe the games that worked for one daughter didn't work for the other one. So those are seasons in life of, when we started, my 9-year-old not in a ton of activities. They're in more activities now.
Yeah.
They're getting older. Finding time to family game is harder. And then when you go to the hobby side of it, sometimes it seems like there's 3 months where every publisher seems to be putting out a game that I'm interested in.
Right.
And then there could be 9 months where I'm like, maybe cherry picking a couple off here and there. That it's not necessarily that my interest in the hobby has gone down, but maybe my interest in what I want to play has gone down. Maybe sometimes the season of my life is determining how interested I am in games. And to appreciate those when they happen and understand why they're happening, I think is important as things go along. And then the last thing about the hobby is that I've realized that there is a difference between the hobby online or the difference between the hobby online and the hobby in person are very different. There's a vast difference by the way that people treat each other online in this hobby compared to when you just meet them at a convention and sit down and play games. You can have people criticizing a design, this component came broken, this was that, and it just kind of seems like just beat down, and you run into those same people at a convention, and you can sit down with complete strangers and have a blast and feel like you just made a new friend. And I think that's one of the things, the last little section I have in my notes is moments of pride. And our listeners are awesome. And the positive culture that has been created around this podcast, I'm so grateful for, that people treat each other well. And it's an online community in the Discord, and people are treating each other well and have general care and concern for one another, and are very aware of some of the stuff that we talk about, where it's like, just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's a terrible game, and treating each other well. I think there's an equal emphasis on the games we play, and the idea of like, this is a new game I played and it's awesome. that is just as important in our Discord and our show as why and how do we teach and play games.
Yep.
And that message along with that. It's not just consume, 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 eat, play, play, play. It's why are we doing this? And when you attack those questions of why and how do we become better at teaching and playing, that those experiences become more rewarding and enriching because of that thought and value, as opposed to mindlessly just playing new game after new game after new game with no contemplation whatsoever. I think we've stayed positive in an authentic way by bringing people up and instead of tearing them down. Certainly we have our nitpicks with the hobby, but never in a specific critique. It's more about just general attitudes, I think, is the most negative that we've been. I'm proud of that. I'm proud that we made it to 200 episodes. I'm proud that we've remained, for the most part, very consistent in not missing episodes. I'm proud of the quality that we've produced, and this might be crazy to you, but like, we've covered 185 games on this podcast, not counting spotlights or other things, but 185 games of the week, which is pretty cool. Like, that's we're getting close to a new game for 4 years. There's some episodes where we've done different conventions, and we did our hi-fi or our top 50 family games last year, which was cool. So we weren't doing games of the week then, but those are just some of the things that I'm proud of. And I think, I've enjoyed the time that we've done this. I know it sounds like we're ending and closing up shop.
No, we're just getting started. And if I could just jump in there, I think, so I love learning, and if I could and my family would allow it, I would go back to school
permanently.
Those days are done. And finishing my last degree that I got, there was a lull there, and the work around the Game Schooler podcast filled that. And I think since episode 100 especially, I feel like I've had a place to continue to learn. And the hobby has so many different types of games that I can see another, quarter century of learning in front of me. And it's like anytime I've been at a convention, whether it's big or small, or even just at a game day at your house or a friend's house, I feel like I walk away and I've learned something. And I really appreciate that. There are some games that I love to get into because of the history of the game and then learn what's around it and all the different pieces. And then there are other games where I just fall in love with the actual design of it and the mechanics and how things mesh together and bounce off of each other and the constraints and the decision-making process. I didn't know any of that existed 10 years ago, really. I didn't, and it's only been in the last 6 or 7 years even of playing games on a consistent basis. And so that's where, as an individual and as a human, that's where I'm really grateful to have this. I'm grateful for all that you've put in for the production and the quality and the investment of time, energy, and talent. And still looking forward to the learning that's here. Our game of the week this week, I talked about being dismissive and kind of being closed to a game. And I feel like more that I've just been open to wanting to learn and wanting to investigate. It doesn't mean that it always comes out a winner. Yeah. But trying a war game 2 years ago, if I would have said, yeah, you're going to sit down on a Sunday and just randomly sign up at your local convention and play a war game, that's what you're going to do for 3 hours. I'd be like, you're nuts. I'm not doing that. Yeah. But I feel like my takeaway is that after 200 episodes, the more I say yes in the hobby, the more fun I'm actually having. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is a brief retrospective on 200 episodes, and I think the biggest takeaway from both of us is just how much we appreciate our listeners and and the folks that keep us going just by their comments and reaching out and participating and things like that. And if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be doing this.
And then just one final thing to add. I didn't mean to just jump in, but Board Game Arena. That was the community note I had there, and like playing games solo and all those pieces that I just can't imagine where we're going to be 50 episodes, 100 episodes, 200 episodes from now, Doug.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm excited for what the future holds and what 2025 holds for the Game Schooler podcast.
All right. Well, let's look back at some of our favorite games of the week in the high 5.
The high 8, the high 10, the high 15.
If you're anything like us, you're constantly on the hunt for new games to try out. After 200 episodes and 185 games of the week, Michael and I are going to reveal our high 5 from those lists of 185 games. Now, while I was making this list, I felt like it just depends on which day of the week you ask me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so glad you said that, Doug.
Because... So, I guess to preface this, do not put a lot of validity into this list because I could have a completely different list tomorrow. And if you ask me to play a majority of the games on our game of the week, and if you go to our website, gameschooler.com, there's a giant database of all of the games that we have covered as game of the week that you can check out there and find out what episode we talked about them and things like that. And I was going through that list of games, and I'm just like, oh, that's a really good game. Oh, I really like that one. If the circumstances are right, this one beats out that one. And it was just such a hard list to make on that regard. And it's like, my top 5 are some of my favorite games. You could swap out 5 very different games, and I'd be like, yeah, it's a good list too. So I don't know how much... how much that helps, or that disclaimer. Yeah, I don't know how you felt, Michael.
Well, up until about 10 minutes before the episode, my list was my favorite games of the week segment. So I had all sorts of stories about when I reached out to this designer and told them that we shared this game, they actually responded. And when, so I did a quick reshuffle of the list. I'm really glad you said that caveat though, Doug, because I do think that anytime you make a list like this is what people remember. So this is, sometimes I'll be like, well, that's a strange comment that somebody said in the Discord. And then I'm like, oh no, that was on my favorite games of all time list. I just forgot about it. They actually know me better than I know me.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you had that caveat, and I think we should jump in and get started. I certainly have 3 honorable mention. If you don't mention any of them, if you do mention them, just people are keeping score at home now. So I do have 3 honorable mention, but number 5
4.
for me. All right, good. Number 5 for me was episode 168, and that's Skyrise. Skyrise is published by Roxley, and Sebastian Pochon is the initial designer of a game called Metropolis that was then re-implemented as Skyrise, and Gavin Brown and a few others have design credits on that. And what I love about this beautifully produced game that is we talk. Are we going to do a deep dive of the game, or just recap of the game, or why we like the games? How are we doing this?
Yeah, just do why you like it, and a throwback to the episode that it was on. And
it's on episode 168. Folks, I love auction games, and this is auction and area control. Yes, please, with some beautiful production. It's one that I look at on my shelf. I'm like, I still haven't played that with my family yet. Oh man, when am I going to get this back to the table? And one that, it faces me. It sits right behind me here to remind me, come play me, open me up and play. I'm a wonderful game. Really, really, the other thing that I'll say, I did not back this one because I knew that Doug did. And then when we first played it, I had that instant remorse of, I need to pick this up in a trade or go find a copy of this because I love this game. So I love how the game comes together and how the board unveils itself as the game goes on. And what feels like such an open auction game turns out to be a very cutthroat game at about the 60% mark, where all of a sudden you're just looking and you know that people can't get things. So you set down one little piece and you close off the three around it. I really enjoy that game.
Yeah. No, it's a great one. My number 5, we talked about in episode 106. And this is kind of an anomaly for me because it does some things that normally I would not like. There are several different things that are going on, avenues and levers that you're pulling on. That's Tapestry, published in 2019 by Stonemaier Games, and Jamie Stegmaier is the designer. There's a kind of a tile placement element as you're building your capital city, which I love that efficiency, and the things that you're using to fill up your capital city are also giving you bonuses on your main board. Meanwhile, you're moving up 4 different tracks, and you need to use resources to move up those tracks. And the thing I really like about this game is how can I spread those resources as far as possible before I have to take my reset turn. And everybody's taking reset turns and going into the next era at different times. And if I can stretch a little farther, I might be able to get up the track before Michael does, and doing that. The other thing that's weird about this game is I've had not great experiences with it, and I've had awesome experiences with it.
Yeah.
And I still like it. There's still stuff I want to go back in and explore and work at. There's an area control and exploration and so many different kind of avenues that for the most part, also if you've been listening to the podcast, there's a long time, you may know that there are certain strategies and things in games that I just don't like to do. And if there's a game where it's like, okay, that seems to be the dominant one, but it's not a gameplay mechanism that I like, I'm not interested in that. This game doesn't seem to have any of those. They have a whole bunch of strategies that I can see how they work, and I like to do all of them. There's never a game where I'm like, well, I'm not going to go down the military track, or I'm not going to do that. I don't really care for that track or the science ones. Like, I've tried them all. I like them all for very different reasons, and it's just determined by my starting stuff of what I'm going to go after. So it's got a lot of discrepancies and incongruency amongst itself of why I should or shouldn't like it, but I still love it. That's Tapestry from episode 106.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in because we have crossover, so let's talk about this right now. It's number 2 for me on my list, Tapestry from episode 106. Calling back to the episode, as Doug said we should do. As you were talking, I was thinking about fishing and pizza. You know, you talked about you can have bad games of Tapestry, and it made me think of a bad game of Tapestry is better than a good day of work. You know, that old adage about fishing, right? A bad day of fishing is better than a good day at work. And I can remember the game that I had where I didn't play it well and I got destroyed by the people around the table. And then you told me a story about the first time you had ever played it and your experience. And that really, it made me think, I kind of like that. You know, not that not every game's going to end within 3 points of each other. I actually kind of like that about the game. The other thing that I love about Tapestry, you mentioned the efficiency and trying to see if you can get that extra turn. I love racing up multiple tracks. And if I can get my science and military to work together, ooh, that's a fun one. What can I do? How can I get these two to bounce off each other with the character that I have and try to really push forward on 2 tracks and maybe be sneaky on one track and clearly jumping out in the other track, whereas the base game has 4 different tracks, 1 on each end of the board. And if you listen to episode 106, you'll hear all about it. I have the expansions. I have the playmat. I haven't played a whole lot of the expansions. You know, one time solo, but not enough worth really talking about here because the base game is just fantastic. The characters in there, the different things that you can do throughout it. It still continues to be my, in the top 3 of most of my favorite lists that I would put together.
Yeah.
So that's my number 2, and I think you said it really well. And we like it for different reasons. We like it for completely different reasons, and it still works for both of us.
And is your pizza metaphor the fact that you can have a terrible slice of pizza, but you're still going to eat pizza?
No, to try every kind. When you were talking about trying all the different kinds, it's like trying not every topping, but boy, I like to try thin crust Chicago style, hand tossed Detroit style, and a New York slice, homemade frozen. You call it.
All right, what's your number 4, Michael?
Oh, yeah, back to me. Number 4 was episode 100, and that's Everdell. And Everdell is designed by James and Clarissa Wilson. I have too many tabs here. Or James A. Wilson, sorry. Artist is Andrew Bosley, and publisher Starling Games. Talked about it at length in episode 100. Right around episode 140 or 150, I had been staring at the Everdell Complete Collection in my house, and like, I have to play this thing. And I got all the stickers on it, and I went on a little 4-game solo binge over 6 weeks and played a few of the expansions that are in it. I still have more to explore in that universe. In the Complete Collection, it combines all of the expansions, and I'm just here to talk about the base game. The base game of Everdell is a beautiful little card game, basically, where you're putting workers out on the board and playing cards out of your hand and trying to get those cards to combo off of each other in a great way, where you also have some limits. You can only play so many cards, whether it's 15 or different expansions have different limits as well. But just trying to get all those little different pieces to work together. I'm one that is critical of anthropomorphic animals in my games, but I like them in Everdell.
It's one of the first, to be fair.
It's one of the first, and that badger, as a Wisconsin guy, that badger on the cover, and really brought me into the universe. But there's something too about the tableau building with cards out of a hand and the worker placement element. I just love how those pieces all fit together, and the competitiveness of it too. That I've played with my game group, played with you several times, and then also family members as well. So that's my number 4 is Everdell.
That was one of my 4 honorable mentions. So good call there. My number 4, some people may be surprised that this is this low on the list. We revisited it in episode 157, but that's Marvel United, 2020 by Simon and Spin Master. Andrea Cervisio and Eric Lang are the designers. And I think and this is kind of a placeholder for just the United system. There's a DC version coming out, and I have this on my list. Not because I've played it 8 billion times, but because the game has provided so much joy for me in different ways. For those that have listened to the podcast for a lot of episodes know that I paint the minis in that game. And in each Kickstarter, there's like 150 of them. And they're bigger. They're not little quick ones. They're not ones you can just burn through. And, if you were going to tabulate the amount of time that I've spent on a game, this is probably the most because of painting those minis. And I wouldn't do that if I didn't enjoy the design, the style, the game. If I had played Marvel United and I was like, this is not that good of a game, I'd be done with it. I wouldn't have spent that much time on it. But the fact that I do and continue to and display them in my game room and have them set up, it's why it's on the list. So that's my number 4, Marvel United. And our when we revisited it, it was episode 1. We originally talked about it as the game of the week.
Don't listen to that.
But episode 157, and it is one that seems to hang on with reviewers and other media folks, especially the ones over at the Dice Tower, that thing has hung around for such a simple game. And the way that they've manipulated that to get so many unique characters out of it. So that's my number 4, Marvel United.
Great pick. One I think we'll continue to talk about over the next few hundred episodes as well.
Change to DC United.
Yeah, and then we'll see what other IP they can grab and put on it because the system works. Yeah, that's good. Number 3 for me is higher on my list than it is on most others. This is a game that I absolutely have grown to adore and was cold on my first play. I just didn't really see it, and that's Creature Comforts. And we talked about this back in episode 79. And it's a worker dice placement game, 1 to 5 players. And I think that I like it. I don't want to say nostalgia reasons, but it probably is more ego reasons than anything else. Don't want to give folks the whole long drawn out backstory, but Doug was out of town for Christmas, so I needed somebody else to play board games with, and I went down south to a friend's house, and I brought this along and played with a whole bunch of people I'd never met before and got it up and running and had a great time. And I've had that experience more than once with Creature Comforts. It's a game that I feel comfortable teaching to strangers and then absolutely trying to steamroll them. So I enjoy dice worker placement a lot, though. I enjoy the randomness of having some information and then gambling. I'm not being very clear of what the game's about because I want you to go back and listen to that episode. I think we did a pretty good job at episode 79 talking about Roberta Taylor's Creature Comforts. It's published by Kids Table Board Games. We saw Kids Table Board Games at Gen Con, and I told them, that continues to be one of my favorite games. And the Kids Table Board Game media person said, well, what sits above it? I don't know. Why is it your absolute favorite? It doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody in my house, but I know me and one of my kiddos do enjoy going through it and playing it. It takes about an hour, and it's a ton of fun to me.
I thought you were going to say that it was nostalgic because you discovered it was a game that you played without me, and how much better games were without playing with me.
I was actually able to teach it. That's my point. I was actually able to take it with me on the road, get it up and running. Everybody understood it. It was a moment where I gained some confidence as a gamer, and then just immediately trounced the people at the table. One of who certainly had it coming. So. No, but it's another one that
I've heard about that gamer. It sounds like he did have it coming.
I can rag on anthropomorphic animals, but that's another little universe that Roberta Taylor and then the artist Shauna J.C. Tenney created that I really enjoy.
All right. My number 3 is a lot of my games here seem to, or 3 out of the 5 come from that episode 100 to 105 when we kind of made that switch. And part of that was the switch of we're not just limiting ourselves to family games. We want to talk about games that we really like.
Or games that you can play in an hour. That was a part of our initial stringent criteria that kept a lot of them off the list in the first 100 episodes.
And so in episode 102, we talked about It's a Wonderful World. This came out in 2019 from Lucky Duck and designer Frederick Gerard. And It's a Wonderful World is my efficiency building, engine building delight game.
So good.
Because you have a set of cards that you are drafting. So it's got drafting up front, which Seven Wonders is another one of my honorable mentions. I know it won't be on Michael's list, so I'll just throw it out there now. But I love that drafting. And then deciding which of those cards I actually want to build, and then which ones I'm going to basically scrap to get resources to help build those cards. And then the way that you go through the phases of, okay, all of your buildings that produce these colored cubes, you get those cubes. And then you go to the next one. And it works out that sometimes you can build a building that will pay out later in the round. And when you do that, it is so satisfying to build that and like, oh, and now I guess I get an extra blue one because I built this one earlier in the round. And because I have that extra blue one, I can now build this one later in the round. It just is such a cool engine, and that decision of like, which ones of these do I actually want to work on or can I actually think that I can finish? And you're trying to accumulate points and do that type of stuff. Just a really cool game. It's a Wonderful World, episode 102. Kind of fallen off the general radar, but I still love this one.
Yeah, we need to replay that. Also, tons of love for that. The one spot was really difficult, so I took the easy way out. Return to Dark Tower. If you want to hear more about it, check it out in episode 200. I think for all things that I talked about, the one thing that I do want to add in, there was a sense of wonder and awe, and I felt like some way between a halfway point of collecting baseball cards and playing with G.I. Joes, and playing Nintendo. I felt like a kid again.
Yeah.
Playing and discovering Return to Dark Tower in the same way that I could play it all by myself in my basement, or I can have some buddies over and play it. And to be able to also share that with my kids, that is a game that, boy, I just really enjoy. And I'm glad we got to talk about it because with its length, with its cost, we've kind of been waiting for the right time, and episode 200 seemed to be the right time. So easy way out, but I do have enough honorable mentions to fill in some other traditional spots. So I'll turn it back to you for your number one.
Well, my number two.
Your number two
is also Return to Dark Tower, and my number one and number two are very significant for me in that regard. Obviously, if you've managed to come here without listening to the previous part of the episode, for our full comments on Return to Dark Tower,
see episode
rewind.
200.
Yeah. I didn't want to just put it at number one. I felt like it could go there. But what is my number one is Dice Throne. And Dice Throne we had at episode 101. And I distinctly remember, I know when we were talking in the School of Gaming segment, Michael talked about, 100 to 150, and we kind of went to a new era. 100 was our last episode before the break, and we ended with Everdell as, this is a solid classic game. 101 was the first game where we said, all right.
Modern classic, yeah.
Money, time to play. We didn't want to talk about Dice Tower or Dice Throne Adventures because of how expensive that was. And not feeling like we could talk about it. And so Return to Dark Tower is that for now, going forward, that continuation of that. And a lot of I think that game sums up a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in the past 100 episodes of giving games a fair shake, and, whether that's dismissing it because everybody loves it or hating it because everybody hates it, maybe it's still a good game, that type of stuff. I think that game is a perfect encapsulation of that. Dice Throne was that first hill for me, and I think sentimentally has a lot to do with the growth of this podcast. Michael and I played this during COVID. We were the only ones gaming together. That's what we did. We would record a podcast, and we would play Dice Throne Adventures, and we would talk about the
work
podcast.
On some curriculum guides, edit.
After and before, and the conversations that happened around there, the relationship building that happened playing that game, I felt like I had to put that at number one because not only did it facilitate the early podcast, it also was the catalyst for what the podcast is now with episode 1.
I knew you'd have it on your list, so that's where I thought that's a spot where I can jump in and say some things without putting it on my list. I try not to do that too often, but the everything that I just said about Return to Dark Tower, about that sense of feeling like a kid again, and that wonder and that joy and being excited for whether it's the new Madden to come out or the next Super Mario Brothers to come out. That's how I feel about all things Dice Throne. Waiting on this next Dice Throne to arrive and deliver, and what are the missions going to be like, and when an update comes out on Kickstarter, Doug and I are talking to each other based on who read their email and their update first. Did you see this? Did you see that? What do you think about this? What do you think about that?
Michael will inevitably get it 3 days before me, so he will gloat
that
there.
That trend has changed. I think your influencer credit has altered the trajectory. I blame your
5
your
spots
remarks
to the post office.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, no, incredible game. It's been very good for our friendship, very good for our show.
Yep. The honorable mentions for me are Unlock.
Let's go back and forth. Let's eyeball here in case we
go
so
ahead.
You got Unlock. I have Quest for El Dorado in episode 80 from the good Dr. Reiner Knizia. I really wanted to get it on the list, but I couldn't be authentic and be myself and bump any of the ones above it. But just an incredible deck builder with a very cool marketplace, and one that I'm glad you introduced me to, and one that I have in my collection and love.
And my last one is Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Oh, good. Go.
No, just a classic game, and we've talked about the base game, and we had a spotlight on the campaign, the 1 to 2 player campaign as well.
Awesome. Yeah, another honorable mention for me is Pirates Cove, which was episode 167. I'm a sucker for pirate games, and this is one that just reached out to the designer on either Geek Mail or LinkedIn and just thanked him for making an awesome game and shared our episode, and actually heard a nice little message back, So that's one of those things that sometimes you send good things out and you don't expect to ever hear, and that's when you do hear back, and it's like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And then the last honorable mention for me is one that, boy, I really want to play again. And Doug, don't take offense to this, but I want to introduce this to my nieces or nephews, or I want to play it in a school setting. I want to play this with new people to kind of see their take on it. And that's Trekking Through History, which we talked about back in episode 87. But I realized I haven't played that in 2024. I played the heck out of it when I got it. I credit this game as helping to bring me into solo gaming, because it's one that I enjoyed so much. I got tired of bothering other people to try to play it again. I was like, I'll just play it solo. And it has a great little solo feature in it. That's Charlie Bink and Underdog Games. Just probably my favorite in that trekking series now today is that Trekking Through History. Really, really do enjoy that one.
All right. Well, let us know which high five or which games of the week you've enjoyed that we've talked about, whether that's games that you enjoy or maybe you just remember the segment or it stood out, made you wanted to play it or something like that. We'd love to hear about that. Subscribe to the podcast, and you can follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. And again, join our Discord, gameschooler.com/Discord. After this episode, we're going to be taking a little break. It's not something that we do lightly, but we're going to kind of take a break for the holiday season and come back shortly in the new year and kind of rest, recharge. And it seems like every 100 episodes we do that, and we kind of come back stronger and better and take that break and come up with new ideas and figure out how we can improve and do better. So we're going to take some time to do that, and hopefully that's okay with everybody else. It's going to have to be.
Yeah, 2 to 3 weeks. We'll be back, and we'll be in and out of the Discord, and we're always available. Email at gameschooler.com. But this time of year, we need to focus on our family and our friends and our faith, and just do that. We feel like the show is better when we do that as well. So breaks are important.
So thank you so much for listening for not only 200 episodes, but certainly the last hour and a half. We really appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.
Shine goodbye, you grab you anymore. Let me know this